Hi everybody, this is Larry Hatcher, and this is Psych 400 Advanced Statistics, and I'm making the assignment for your next SPSS exercise. It's going to be SPSS Exercise 10.7 Multiple Regression Hierarchical Analysis. You'll perform an analysis on the undergraduate activities questionnaire. Let's see, I think I'll begin by reminding you of where you find things. Since we've gone to a no paper document format, I prefer that folks download a copy of the Word document that has my SPSS exercise. The last part of that Word document has the questions that you answer regarding the output. I ask that you download the Word document, keep just the question part, and type your answers directly into the question part. Here's to refresh your memory on how you do it, and specifically how you'll do it with this particular exercise. You log in Canvas, you go to Psych 400. On the left-hand side, you'll select Modules. That'll take you to our Psych 400 modules. Click the one that's called P400 SPSS Exercise. Scroll down a ways and you'll come to the P400 SPSS 10.7 Multiple Regression Hierarchical Situational Constraints. I've given you the long version of the title. The short version of the title is what you see here on the screen. Open up the document in Word. As you know, the document will appear online. You will download the document by opening it up in Word. Open up the document in Word. You'll complete and submit only Part 2, the questions. That's pages 8, 9, and 10 of the Word document. Previous pages, pages 1 through 7, tell you what kind of tasks to perform in SPSS. Pages 8 through 10 includes Part 2 questions. The only part you'll hand in to me will be Part 2 questions, along with copies of your SPSS output, which you will have pasted into the Word document by using Snip and Sketch, or the snipping tool in Word, or whatever your preferred snipping tool is. Now that is where you find the assignment. Let's go to the particulars. It is SPSS Exercise 10.7 Multiple Regression Hierarchical. Part 1, Tasks. Please do everything that's indicated in Part 1. When it comes to Part 2 questions, you will not answer all the questions. When it comes to Part 2 questions, you will answer only questions 1 through 8. You'll skip items 9 and 10. Now technically, what I've just presented is all that you need. If you feel confident in using SPSS, you can go ahead and get started with the exercise. For those of you that like a little bit more detailed guidance, I'm going to go over the exercise. I've highlighted the most important parts and I'll read it to you. This part is optional, but again, if you don't feel 100% comfortable with SPSS yet, you do well to listen to this next part. If you do feel confident with SPSS, you can go ahead and get started. Now, for those of you that want a little more guidance, let's zoom this thing in a little bit more. I believe that's a little bit better. Upper right hand corner, it's SPSS Exercise 10.7 Multiple Regression Hierarchical Part 1 Tasks. First part gives you the exercise overview. Let's skip down to the bottom half of the page. Bottom half of the page sets up the scenario you're going to investigate. Dr. O'Day's theoretical model of the determinants of grade point average. Imagine that Dr. O'Day is conducting research on possible determinants of grade point average earned by college students based on a review of the research. She has developed a 4-factor model of the determinants of college GPA. Her theoretical model is illustrated in figure 10.1. I think I'm going to switch my focus to be a different kind of focus. Let's see if that is better or worse in terms of being disruptive. That's less disruptive. Good. Okay, here is Dr. O'Day's theoretical model of the determinants of college grade point average that you're going to investigate with your analysis. Criterion variable in the analysis is GPA for the current semester. You believe it should be predictable from these 4 predictor variables. Academic achievement, motivation. You score high on this, it means you're highly motivated to do well in school. Academic self-efficacy. You score high on this, it means that you believe it is possible for you to get an A in a course if you work. Constraints in general. You score high on this, it means there's a lot of things going on in your life that is preventing you from doing your schoolwork. Stress symptoms, you score high on this, it means you often feel tense and edgy and such. That is Dr. O'Day's theoretical model. On page L93 of your handout, it describes these variables in great detail. We don't necessarily need to review them in such excruciating detail. We come to page L94 and the initial analysis. In her initial analysis of the data, Dr. O'Day entered the 4 predictor variables depicted in the figure in just one step. She found model R-squared statistic for this model was statistically significant, represented a medium effect according to Cohen's guidelines. Most of the predictor variables displayed multiple regression coefficients that were significant and in the predicted direction. Dr. O'Day shared these findings with Dr. Gray, expecting him to be positively impressed. I have to stop now and say something about my unfortunate naming of these characters. Right now, we are still dealing with the tragedy of the passing of one of our biology professors, Dr. Gray. His last name was spelled in a different way. Needless to say, I did not have that individual in mind when I made up this fictitious exercise. I made up this fictitious exercise almost 10 years ago, well before I knew of Dr. Gray. So I hope you'll forgive me for this unfortunate coincidence. But let's continue with Dr. Gray's reaction to her analysis. Dr. Gray was not impressed. This doesn't prove anything, he said. Only 2 variables that really predict college GPA are the verbal subtest and the quantitative subtest, the Scholastic Aptitude Test. Every college in the country has SAT scores for every college student, and they can use the SAT scores to predict college GPA just fine. Because of this, nobody needs to use your 4 predictor variables. It's true that the 4 variables in your model might account for some of the variance in college GPA, but they won't account for any of the variance beyond variance already accounted for by the 2 SAT tests. If you statistically controlled for those 2 SAT tests, variance accounted for by your predictor variables would drop to 0. That sounds like a challenge. So the current analysis, what you folks are actually going to do with SPSS. Current analysis, ouch, is it possible Dr. Gray is correct? To find out, you will reanalyze data from the study, this time statistically controlling for the 2 SAT tests. At step 1, you'll add SAT verbal test and SAT quantitative test to the multiple regression equation. At step 2, you'll add the 4 variables that constitute Dr. O'Day's 4-factor model of college GPA as illustrated in the figure. Useful resources for performing these analyses. I provide my usual summary, the places that you can look to find guidance in doing the analyses. I tell you at the top of page L95, I tell you what pages in Andy Field's book are useful, both 4th edition and the 5th edition, both the North American and the non-North American editions. I also indicate where in your Psych 400 course pack you'll find information from me that explains the nature of these analyses. Leave it to you to look that up. We're going to continue with the current analysis. And the heading is the SPSS Exercise Tasks. Task 1, opening the SPSS data file. Give you the name of the data file you're going to analyze. It is undergrad activities. Task 2, performing multiple regression analysis. You'll add predictor variables to the equation in 2 steps, in 2 blocks, using the language of SPSS. In block 1, step 1, you'll add the following two independent variables to a multiple regression equation that will serve as control variables. These should appear in this order. Now, by the way, statistically, it doesn't matter what order you report them in, but if you put them in the order that I indicate, it is a lot easier for me to grade your output, so please do put them in this order. Listed SAT verbal subtest and SAT quantitative subtest. In block 2, that is to say, in step 2 of the same analysis, you'll add the following four independent variables to the same multiple regression equation. They'll appear in this order. If you're familiar with SPSS, you know that it allows you to start a multiple regression analysis. It tells you which variables you want to add in block 1. Those will serve as your control variables. It allows you to indicate which variables you'll add in block 2. They will serve as your variables of theoretical interest. I'm on page L96. And these are the variables you're going to add: academic achievement, motivation, academic self-efficacy, constraints, and general stress symptoms. Although the analysis you perform will be very similar to the one that Andy Field describes in his book, there'll be one important difference. You will not request all the statistics and diagnostic procedures that Field requests. Doing those diagnostic procedures is important. You will want to do that when you're in graduate school analyzing data for your thesis, but it would double the amount of time that we need to spend on this exercise, and we need to keep moving. So this is what I do want you to do in your analysis. Although the analysis that you perform will be very similar to, I already said that, didn't I? You will, however, request the following statistics as part of your analysis, and here I indicate what statistics you should request. Task 3, printing the output. Print your SPSS output. By now you realize you're not actually going to print out the SPSS output on paper. Instead, you're going to use the snipping tool or some similar tool to snip all of your SPSS output, append it at the end of the Word document you hand in, and you'll use the pin tool to circle the things that are relevant. Hint, if you perform your analysis correctly, part of your results section should look like this. On page L97, I show you part of the multiple regression analysis. Your table will look better than this table, but the numbers should be the same. So there is your hint section. Page L98 has nothing. It is a blank page. We come to page L99. L99 is where your questions begin. Part 2, questions. This will be the section of the Word document that has the assignment that you will actually hang on to, and you will upload as your completed exercise. You can delete the first 7 pages, just keep these pages 8 through 9. You will answer all the questions except for 9 and 10. You will type your answers directly into the little spaces that I have provided here. In your SPSS output, which will follow this, you'll use the pin tool in the snipping tool or snip and sketch to circle the items, parts of your output that I ask you to circle, and you'll label Q1, whatever part of the output is relevant to question 1. You'll label Q2, whatever part of the output is relevant to question 2, and so forth. What else? I believe that is what you need to know about doing the current exercise. Let's back off a little bit on this and make sure that I've made the assignment clear. Okay, Psych 400, SPSS Exercise 10.7, Multiple Regression Hierarchical. Part 1 tasks, you'll do everything, and Part 2 questions, you'll answer questions 1 through 8, you'll skip questions 9 through 10. Deadline is 1 week from today. The deadline will be Friday, November 27, 4:30. I should have said that at the very beginning of the video, didn't I? Shouldn't I? I'll include it in the announcement that I'm going to email to everyone. Anybody has problems, anybody has questions, please send an email to my regular SVSU email account. It is Hatcher at svsu.edu.